Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone here at ODI HQ and online, to those of you who are streaming. My name's Siobhan and it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce our speaker for today, Violeta. Violeta will be speaking to us about how you can make data work for you and also how you can identify skills that can help you do this. Please can I remind everyone here, questions will be taken at the end, but if you are streaming and you'd like to ask a question, go on Twitter and use the hashtag #ODI Fridays. Now I will hand over to Violeta.
Woohoo! Thank you. Hi. Well, welcome. So hopefully some of you are interested in understanding how data can work for you. And actually, it's not going to be a talk about tech whatsoever. It's going to be more about just understanding what is this world of data, what is this ecosystem, and do I already have the skills actually to be able to participate. One of the skills that at least I want you to take with you, and this is the first thing that I will say, is actually on this slide. I'll give you a minute if you can spot it. Actually, it's understanding licenses and certificates. So in this license, for example, what I'm allowing you to do with this presentation is basically you can take it, you can use it. The only thing that I'm asking you to do is if you can just please give an attribution. And when you find things like this across the web, you should be able to understand what you can and you cannot do with things. So this is actually a skill that is not as common as it might sound, and is not as boring as it does sound, because licenses and limitations, but it is something that enables you to start working in this ecosystem of working of data. I did title the presentation My Day Job, and data is not only about your job, but you spend a lot of time at work. Probably you're acquiring some skills, and work is usually a place where you can test it. But it can also be about fun. And let me just walk through an example of a movie night, because maybe even the concept of data is not necessarily very clear in terms of what is it, how is it collected, where does it even come from. And the Wall Street Journal did a very interesting article that basically talks about a movie night that between two women ordered pizza, went home, watched a movie. And you might wonder, like, well, where's the data here and what can I do with it? Well, let's walk you through it. So this is you. Talking to your friend, ordering, deciding when would you want to order pizza. The Alexa, you put a call on Alexa. Alexa also has, for example, your credit card information. You order it. It's much easier, maybe more simple. You go to your friend's house. You're looking for directions on Google Maps, for example, just to find where it is. You go with your friend, take pictures, talk on social media. And then you spend some time swimming through recommendations of films that you can make, for example. So in this scenario, where's the data? And what can you do with the data? And even who is collecting the data and how much is it? And how is that relevant to you? Well, let's see. This is the amount of data. And this is a screenshot from the Wall Street Journal. So it's a bit blurry because of that. But basically, we started to see companies who all of a sudden have an interest. They collect that data because they see the potential of what that data can do for them, or they don't, and they just collect it, and eventually they will see what goes on. But actually, in this transaction, and you can think about it for being just on a span hours of 2 hours, for example, 53 data points, data information was collected from this transaction, and they actually did this. They replicated the whole scenario just to understand how many data points were collected. 23, actually just a snippet, came from Facebook that collected it, and only the top, the gray part, is actually data that you as a consumer knew you were sharing. All the rest of it, the bottom, you don't really know. So this is not to say that, go ahead and read all the different limitations that we have in working with data, but understanding how that ecosystem works can help you, for example, maybe start understanding how that is, advocating, communicating that this is actually happening if you feel threatened by it. If you don't feel threatened by it, that's fine as well, because as long as you make it something that is for you, that it's interesting to you to understand, well, if I start collecting data, what are the services that I can offer? Or do I have to even collect data? Maybe I can just write about stories and sharing and collecting it. And at the ODI, we have worked with organizations and institutions through understanding what is the data skills that are involved in this ecosystem that we're describing. Because it's not just about tech people who know how to code or how to program, how to design software. It's just much more than that. I'll take you a minute to look through it, but for example, you start identifying that there's different blocks where you can identify skills that, for example, match together by color. So innovating with data, designing services, and achieving sustainability kind of sounds like in the courses that you might find online or the different responsibilities that you have in your office kind of match together. So I'll give you a minute just to see and spot where do you think you fall in, and is there something that you're not feeling represented? I would like to know that as well after the talk. But basically, all these are the skills that are involved around data. When you look at from this side of the framework, this being the middle, if you look at the left-hand side, you have things like working ethically, governing with access. So you have somebody from a managerial position who has to make decisions about how the company is going forward. If you're the innovator in the company, then you have to understand, well, can you and can you not use data? What are the ethical restrictions that you can work with data? On the right-hand side, it's more about the technical skills of actually once you have that data, what can you do to bring insights, to find trend analysis, and in the middle part is more or less like the strategy that you would carry forward with your company. You have leading change, for example, developing strategy, finding the insights, creating value from data. These are all things that don't necessarily apply to only tech knowledge. If you lead change, for example, it's very important for you to understand how these two sides merge together, right? If you're the person in the organization who says, actually, let us discover how we can make data work for us. Let us discover, can our business actually start collecting the data? Well, you have to probably understand what are the limitations or possibilities in terms of overall company strategy. And you probably have to understand if in your team, there is somebody who can actually deliver those insights and make them work for you in a particular manner. If you want to innovate with data, well, that's great, that's fantastic. But you do have to understand how is working data ethically and data works. Do you have anybody in the organization who has that knowledge? So we start seeing that it's not only about this one task that it stands alone. It's many different people's skills within the organization who collaboratively can bring things forward. And if there's nothing else that, if you're one of those in one of those areas, but you really want to get your hands dirty with working with data, but you don't even understand how, for example, finding insights work, there's a very simple way that you can try and test that. And for example, it's with this exercise. Thomas Davenport from the Harvard Business Review writes very, very good articles about how data works, the ecosystem of it, and basically provided with a simple example to introduce people to start thinking about what can I understand from data? Is data really for me? And he said, well, basically, take it very simple. Just take 1 week where you go from Monday through Friday and take note of the times of when the meetings are supposed to start that you have with your company, and take note of the actual timing of when they started. And over time, you would see that there's a trend potentially of, well, what is the average time that all my meetings are scheduled in? How many of those have been canceled? Have they been canceled always from a particular person? And when you start thinking like this, you can start understanding, well, like actually, can we make a better way of doing meetings? Are the meetings on Tuesdays, for example, always very busy and tend for then for it to cancel because they're very close to each other? Or are the meetings very late in the evenings, always late in the week, not as productive? Are they always about the same theme? Are it always about finance? So it's really starting to think about this. You can really apply and say how will data work for you in that sense? How to have better conversations in your company office, for example, of, you know what, let's lead change, but in a very, very simple way. So it's really not about data in any more complex way than that. And at the ODI, we have created some courses to help you walk through that as well. We have open data in a day that basically talks about what is open data, more about these licenses, for example, and their limitations and uses. And we do offer more open concepts about what is machine learning, what are the different techniques, but from not a technical perspective, because at first, we do believe, and me personally as well, it's not only about applying the technologies directly, because there's so many and potentially not always are they're beneficial, but it's just more about understanding the strategy, and you in an organization play a big, big role, because as we see from this, all the organization works together in this ecosystem of pushing things forward to be delivered. And with that, really, I'll end here, because I would like to hear your questions and see what you were expecting maybe from getting to this talk, and how can we help you further.
Great,
Thanks.
you so much, Violeta. I'm going to be taking some questions from the floor. Would anybody like to start me off? Yes, Hannah. Oh, this microphone doesn't amplify your voice, but it is so that everybody online can hear you.
What do you think the barriers are for people understanding that they're working with data or being comfortable with talking about data?
That's a good question, because I'm not in people's brains, so I'm not really sure what they would want. But I think data at first always sounds scary. And you do read articles, for example, that all of a sudden, possibly this is maybe one of the things that maybe shocked you, because the people from here, I saw it in your faces, right? This is quite a lot of data that is collected, and the limitations come from, maybe they come a little bit from an individual in terms of, well, I'm not a big company, I'm not Google, I'm not Amazon, I'm not whatever, to actually, because those are the names on those presentations. But starting to think, I'll skip through very, very simply on things that look like this, realizing that this is data. This is just an x-axis and a y-axis over time describing something at your company, something that is a habit of you. You can do it about even your own filmed interest or your own paths, and you can even download data from your phones. You can do that. You're live, for example, from Google Maps, and start analyzing and seeing, not analyzing in the sense of something that is very abstract, but just seeing your route. And that, I think, familiarizing yourself with technology in that sense will help you think more about data. And at your company, anything can be data, right? This is just like times in meetings, and are they canceled or are they not? You can do it with many, many things. You can do it with the amount of chairs that are here and how many are missing throughout the day, or who sits where, right? Just to start understanding how to better design an event, for example. Like, are there too many people who always sit on one side than the other one? Things like this, right? So it's just not really about big data and about big things that are sweeping through across the media all the time. It's just really simple things to just continue to work forward. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just follow up with, what do you think the skills gaps are at the moment with sort of people entering the workforce?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of what level do they seem to fall at?
Right. Is it people that are from university, or just people who are just changing lives?
Either, really.
I think the biggest gap, and there's a lot of, the Open University does a lot of work around this, where they're trying to see, well, what are we teaching students who are exiting, and what are the expectations of SMEs, right, like small and medium enterprises that they have to achieve that stuff. And it's actually, the complexity sometimes comes in the relevance in which things at school are taught. For example, a data scientist or a computer scientist, there's not necessarily maybe the business perspectives. There's not necessarily the applicability of some of the tools that you're studying. It's just more about, hey, use this tool, and this is how you do it, this is how you program. And from a technical person, for example, coming into the workforce, there's maybe not a lot of gaps necessarily in that sense, but there are some understanding of context of how could that work for them. And for other people who do not have the technical skills, that maybe are going through the daily lives being like, oh, am I going to be replaced by some data scientist? Well, the limitations there, I think, is just maybe just we still continue to use Excel, and Excel has been around for a very, very long time, and it's a great tool. And I think that the majority of people don't even know what possibilities you can do with Excel. And we start moving very fast towards R or Python, other programming languages, or even other software tools and designs. And I think the gaps in that sense just comes from understanding more what you want to do and exploring if those tools already do the job for you. I think it's just really more about making it relevant to yourself and seeing what you can use and what you can't.
So my question really is about using data in today's sort of global society. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we want to make it interesting and fun and get people to see the data is in everything. But do you think that there's actually like a real need now, because of the fast pace with which ethics questions are coming up, and the way that governments are using data, do you think that people need to be really thinking about being more educated?
Yes, I definitely think so. I think there's this discrepancy, I do think, that what the media is talking, what the expectations are for companies to start adapting machine learning technology and deep learning algorithms and things like this. But actually, there was a survey done across Europe of all the different startups that exist that have branded, I work with machine learning or I work with AI. In the survey, actually, when they interviewed them, all of them said, we really just work with basic statistics. So it's really this discrepancy of course, you're going to talk about machine learning because it sells, or AI because it sells. And I'm not saying that some companies are not using it appropriately. Obviously, there are some out there that do. But the biggest majority, they're way behind still on how this technology is adapted. And I think it does come from this literacy idea of, well, what is it? Like, am I even doing data? Can I collect? Is my even responsibility to talk about data and collect it and do something with it? No, but there's, like, in the skills framework, for example, we did create, and you mentioned working ethically, for example, as a thing. Well, if you don't think about the ethics of it, data should not come into the place. But if you don't think of the potential, of the implications of using data and what that can harm, thinking about it is also a great way of getting involved in that conversation, to push things forward or to shape them in a different way and make them for you. So it's not only about, again, it's not only about the technical skills. It's really the whole ecosystem involved around it.
Thank you. Yes, Hannah?
Sorry, it's me again.
Great.
If somebody was in a role where they sort of had a feeling they were using data, or they kind of knew day to day that they were using it for different purposes, but their job wasn't specifically data, and they were worried about embarking on a course or something more formal because they didn't feel like they were there yet in terms of their confidence with working with it. Can you sort of recommend any sort of free tools or anything that they could read, or kind of where would you start if you didn't have the backing of your employer to explore your own skills?
Yeah, there's so many. I think, again, like, it depends on what you want to do, but if you just want to say, learn how to use Excel better, for example, just to see what the possibilities, there's many courses out there that you can find and start exploring. There's great open sources. There's a platform called Kaggle, where there's a lot of data sets that are available and they have challenges. That is more for if you have technical abilities, but that would provide you some space of just testing and exploring and seeing how other people have been working. What is their process of analyzing something, and that's quite open. And there's also there's many tools out there that free sources that, like Coursera and all of those, they are free, some of them, and at least in terms of a lecture, of hearing conversations and talks that people are having about that, then it's quite useful. And then at the ODI, obviously, we're running as we go and designing tools and facilitating conversations that happen around data, without those necessarily technical terms or technical applications. But we're designing that based on as we go. Great.
I was wondering, do you think that whose responsibility do you think it is to try and get these kinds of skills and knowledge out to people? Would it be the individual responsibility, the organisation's responsibility, or even maybe the government's responsibility to promote data literacy?
It's a tricky question, because I do think, yes, thinking of responsibilities, I think sometimes is quite limiting, because then you can very easily fall into the sense of, well, it's somebody else's job, really, because I'm not the one responsible. And I am a more advocator of somebody who just takes the first step and says, what can I do? Show me what I can, and what are the tools that are around me that I can use, and kind of go from there. But I think in many companies that are experiencing change inside with this data-driven business, when I do it like this, but some companies are very keen in understanding how to incorporate data literacy in their companies, and we have done that with some of our clients, and just helping by providing learning materials, for example. So in that case, was an inner need for a change. But for that to happen, for somebody to reach to us, there has to be somebody interested in that organization who understands what they can do with data, or just understanding we need somebody who's an expert out there who can help us get some guidance from that. But I think definitely that there's a lot of costs involved in covering all these services. So definitely government should play a role as well, in terms of if this is something that we're headed towards, if even government is designing tools that are improving our lives every day, then how about education and implementing that data education into schools, for example, from earlier ages, and providing maybe some standards on what should be in curriculums and at what stage, right? Because we do that with absolutely everything. And it seems like the first wave was caught by maybe data boot camps that are starting to teach like the data science skills. But then governments, I think, should have a responsibility as well, just to incentivize those programs to start. And universities are increasingly adapting into their curriculum some more data talks, but from techie and non-techie perspective as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions? Yes.
I just had a follow-up on what you were just speaking in terms of like the role of government and in a way like of public education to, in a way like giving access to everyone to this kind of like data education. But it's always a problem about like the structure capacity of the schools, in the sense of how can we make, like, it's going to be really expensive to have this kind of structure in public schools. So I think this would be like the main obstacle to overcome. I think it was more a reflection rather than a question. It's more about like, then what don't you think it would be more important to incentivize this kind of education outside of public schools, in the sense of giving more free courses available online that people can do, rather than offering them in schools, because then there will always be a divide between public and private schools, for instance.
Well, I haven't mentioned that should be a free service, or at least that was not the way that I wanted to communicate this. Responsibilities in terms of there's every year, every 5 years, there's a curriculum revision in schools of what is offering. So adapting it to the way that societies are moving forward, I think, is necessary. But in no way that should be free, because that's somebody else's job. This is hours that a teacher has to go in and serve. So it's not necessarily in like come in and do data literacy. But if that's implemented into the curriculum, there's like talks about societal behavior, I think, or at least in some universities in Spain, at a younger age, that started to be implemented as to give people an awareness of how to work around a city. So if these courses are implemented in schools, I think that's a very good way to move forward. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. And one over here.
It seems to be more of a common understanding now that in order for data within an organisation to be useful, it's important that it's not just the data people that are able to add to it and access it and kind of feed it into different products and services. And it seems to be more widely understood that to have more diversity of people feeding into that data and having different parts of an organisation giving their knowledge about how data should be used and fed into products, and how it's the kind of ethical impacts of using that data. Do you have any advice for somebody that might be in a data team that's looking to sort of diversify the input from other people in their organisation, and how they might be able to kind of create that forum for sort of discussions?
Like discussions in an organisation of how data can be, more people can have access to data.
Within the organisation, or like input in or have a view on it.
Well, I think, then it could be complicated depending on where you work and how structured your company is. But those groups or organizations were more open to meet and have a diversity of group of people when the design of the project is occurring, when there's feedbacks on projects, when there's after the sprints or things like this. I think it's a good moment, because if you're working on something and you want to hear the perspective of others, I think more and more increasingly people want to work collaboratively and understand how to make it more diverse and accessible. I think this will be good opportunities, but I think it just depends on the company that you work for. I think if it's a very rigid one, it's always easier to start talking with teammates or just walking around, I guess, into the company and just finding somebody who you have a good affinity with, and then maybe starting the conversations from there. Because doing it alone is always complicated, but you just have to find allies in your organization to maybe start implementing this in the first place by having small chats at the cafeteria or anywhere. But I think if there's a culture of getting together and reflecting on how the projects have moved forward, or what could we improve and what couldn't we improve, then those are good moments to come and speak about, hey, actually, if we had done this with data, if we had improved this, if we had access to this, or if we had thought about this ethical implications of us collecting data of newborns, for example, then you would begin to raise awareness in your organization of things that maybe others didn't know that they had to think about in that sense.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the floor? No? Okay,
Great.
well, that's
Thanks.
it. Well, thank you very much, Violeta.
Thank you.
Okay.